Hello, fine folks, and welcome to Booghy Plays. Tonight I am not playing, or I am playing with questions, as I usually say. My guest this evening or this morning, afternoon, I think, is in the U.S. Um, is the creator of the famous, let's say, or the beautiful world of Everdell. He's also an illustrator for Tapestry, and one of my most anticipated games of 2022, which I've talked a bit about with Johnny Pack, Unconscious Minds. So my guest tonight is an illustrator which says that he makes stuff and takes names. He created also worlds for video games, and I think one of the most known video game is Assassin's Creed. So without further ado, my guest tonight is Andrew Bosley. Welcome to Booghy Plays, Andrew Bosley. How
Hey,
do you feel?
I feel great. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Welcome. It is a bit of a different route tonight because you are the first artist, that's illustrator, which I interview. Up until now, I interviewed designers mostly.
hmm
So it's going to be a different talk a bit. So I'm quite excited. How do you feel?
I'm good. It's a bit rainy where I'm at. Just trying to stay dry at the moment.
Well, it's a good time to draw things, to draw new worlds, to create new things. Whenever it rains, I think is a good time to do that.
It
First,
is.
I hope you'll feel fine here in our comfy, we call it, virtual gaming room, to in our comfy virtual gaming chairs.
I
Uh,
feel very comfy.
well, um, and without further ado, I'd say let's go to do the interview. No?
Sure,
Which is
sure.
more like a chat. Let's say we're gonna
Yeah,
chat more or less, and I'm going to start way back and talk a bit about where were you born and where did you grow up.
sure. That is way back. Well, I was born in California, on the west coast of the United States. Was born in a city on the coast. Spent a lot of time at the beach. Um, but gosh, and I, I I didn't have anything spectacularly interesting happen to me in my life growing up. But I was always drawing, and I had very supportive parents that encouraged me
To draw.
to
I
to
see.
pursue that and develop it.
What were your parents' professions?
My father was a computer programmer. He was very early on in computers when they were slowly getting
So in the
smaller and
80s,
huh
80s, in the 80s, we're
in
talking
the
about the
80s.
80s. Okay.
Yeah, he was involved in computer science stuff and um, a lot of stuff I didn't know, but or understand. But we did have lots of computers in our house from an early age, really old and clunky and uh, computers, but we had that. And my mom, most of the time, was a stay-at-home mom. She most of the time, but as we got older, she had been a teacher before me and my siblings were born, and then eventually, when we got a little bit older, she went back to teaching.
I see.
And
And how many siblings do you have? How many brothers and sisters?
I have two older brothers and one younger sister.
Ooh, big family.
Yeah,
Lots of
I
noise.
beat the I have five kids of my own, so I beat my parents with a big family. But yeah, it was
And how is it to grow up in a family with so many with bigger brothers and a smaller sister?
Well, I can't think of anything to compare it to, but I loved it. I was very close with my siblings, though we certainly had plenty of opportunities to fight and argue with each other. And I think when I was my younger sister was annoying to me for a period of time, and then she became one of my closest friends as she got older. Um, I was the only artist in the home, and so though we were a fairly musical family. My mom is a very musical person. My father not so much,
Yeah.
but my mom raised us in music, and so everybody in the family did musical things. But I was the only one, as I was the only visual artist.
And
Um,
what your siblings' professions? What did they
um,
manage to do after, or what did they end up doing when they grew up?
Nothing in the creative world. My brother, one of my oldest brother, is in engineering. My next brother is involved in banking. Uh,
They liked
and
money more than
well, he takes care of other people's money. He doesn't make a lot of money himself, not necessarily. I mean that you know,
yeah.
he's not in that type of banking.
I see.
He helps other people with their stuff. My and then my sister is in marketing. She's works for an advertising firm out in California.
So y
So she's a creative
she's
person,
okay,
but
yeah, somehow, yeah, marketing has a bit of creativity. But how did you end up being the only creative soul in that
I don't
environment?
know. I don't know. I mean, everybody else. Well, nobody else kept up with their music either, and I didn't. Though I, I, I tried to for a little while. We all did stuff, but I really was the only one that came out of it doing truly creative things. So I don't know. It was. I mean, it was in me right from the beginning. I was. My mom teases me because I was drawing on the walls before I was drawing on paper, and so it was it was always something I want to do. It really was never another option. I wasn't good at anything else, so I uh,
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to pursue this, and I'm glad it worked because nothing else probably would have worked very well for me. So
And childhood shapes up a person's life a lot. It can
yeah.
create traumas. It can create um, um, uh, lines for the future. Put it in quotes. Um, how did your childhood shape you up, created you as a person,
Um, as a creative person,
as a person in general, and then as a creative person?
sure. Well, gosh, I mean, I grew up in a very religious home. I am myself still a very religious person. I certainly feel like that impacts me significantly to this day, and I feel like the uh, positive influences that I had in my family and through my community. Uh, I feel extremely fortunate and blessed. You know, I had a very pleasant, fortunate uh, childhood. Not without its own challenges, like everybody else has. But so I think I'm not an artist that sees a lot of, I don't know. Many artists, focus on negative things and are brooding and are moody. I'm overgeneralizing here, but I feel like I'm a very positive person, and I think that's reflected in my work. I have at times worked in industries and worked in projects that required me to tap a darker side, but that's not naturally where I'm at. Um,
Yeah.
I tend to tell people this is a reference in the States that makes a little bit more sense, but like I am a very PG 13 person.
I see
You'd
that.
understand this as a film guy,
Yeah,
and so I my art is very PG 13, and I'm also a very PG 13 person.
I
So
see.
that might be boring to many people, but it's been very pleasant for me. But I probably credit that to my
Your
upbringing,
upbringing, yeah,
which
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So practically, yeah, it influenced you early on. And where did you go to school? And when I mean, no, first let's go to when did you think you're going to? When did you finally realize that you want to be an artist? You want to create worlds. You want to go more into this and not another thing which you, I don't know, engineering or something else.
Sure. Well, I mean, like I said, that was right from the get-go. I knew I remember thinking about professionally being an artist when I was in kindergarten. So when I was 6 or 5, I knew that I wanted to be in art from a very early age. That definitely evolved in what that was going to look like. That changed constantly throughout the years. And there was a time even in high school where I I had my oldest brother, as I mentioned before, is an engineer now, and he was very interested in engineering when he was younger. And so there was a time when I was overly influenced by him, not in a negative way, but like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
looked up to my brother, and I thought, well, maybe I want to be an engineer. Maybe I want to do, and so I actually for a time kind of took a path that was heading a little bit in between, and I looked into drafting and architecture and uh, and art with a much more practical, you know, application for a short time. But then I knew I wanted to eventually. I corrected my course and knew I wanted to be back in more creative things. So it was always going to be art. For a long time, it was going to be an animation. I thought I would. I mean, when I thought of artists, I thought of Disney. I thought of feature animations that I grew up watching, and I thought, okay, if I'm an artist, I need to be an animator. So or I was going to work for Disney, or I was going to work for some animation studio, and that came in and out throughout my entire childhood, college, everything. There were times when I wanted to be a children's book illustrator. There were times when uh, I wanted to work as a modeler in 3D for film or for video games. Um, but it wasn't until college that I kind of things opened up to me that to avenues that were new. I mean that was still a long way away before I was where before board games as a profession was anywhere in my mind.
I
That
see.
that took a long time to get to there
Uh,
where I'm at now.
can you tell me when did you? Because we're still in the childhood phase. When did you start playing board games, or or playing itself? Did you play sports? Did you maybe you started playing somewhere different, somehow differently, not necessarily board games first?
Sure. Well, so as far as what games I played in general as a child, I played a lot of video games when I was a kid. Not a lot. We didn't have a lot of video games in our house, so we did have some, but my parents said if you want to do it, you got to buy it yourself. So I didn't have any money, so I didn't. My brothers did, and sometimes they'd let me play. But I would go to my friends and we'd play video games all the time. I As far as sports, I've always
Atari.
loved
What
sports.
was the back then? What did you play it on?
Gosh, let's see. Original Nintendo for
Nintendo.
sure.
Yeah.
And then my friends had Sega Genesis,
Oh,
and
so that's in the 90s
yeah,
already.
oh yeah, this is a while back. So and then Nintendo 64 and all the
Yeah,
things that
yeah,
moved on from there.
yeah,
I skipped things like GameCubes and all that sort of stuff. And I came back into video games later in the PlayStation era, but still back in my childhood, I did play some sports, not a lot. Our family was not a very sports heavy, like we really cared about it, like a lot of
Yeah,
like some
yeah, yeah,
people really
yeah,
care.
yeah.
But I grew up and my mom, I think probably to save herself during summer, she said all of the kids, all of us, all
Outside.
of my siblings and I, we had to go play sports in the summer no matter what. Like we had to join a league, we had to be on a team, we got to go do something. So I played baseball, I played soccer a lot, football,
Yeah,
um, not American football,
yeah.
European football,
Football.
which is still something I absolutely love for now
I, d-
and follow.
I never understand why Americans call football something which they play with their hands, and
I I
to football they call it soccer. Okay.
I I love my country, but I will say that is a thing that does not make any sense. I agree. American sports is not a thing that I'm. I love baseball. I do love baseball, but yes, I am a dedicated, passionate fan of European
Football.
football,
Yeah,
not American football.
I see. Um, and board games. When did they
Yes.
come to into your life?
So it's funny. I board games. We played tons of board games when I was a kid. But the traditional ones that as a young American, we were exposed to, with Monopoly and Risk and Battleship and all those sort of things
Axis
that
and
were not.
Allies.
Huh?
Axis and Allies.
No, I didn't play that. That was probably. Oh, gosh, I even still don't know that game very well. So, but no, I played very traditional, I guess, stuff
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
that
understand.
had been around for a long time, Clue and things like that. But it's funny because when I was I mean, I'll jump into high school just a tiny bit. I started to make games when I was in high school. I actually started to make games. I remember being influenced by Star Trek, The Next Generation when I was a kid, and I loved the idea of 3D chess, and so the concept of three-dimensional game stuff. And so I remember when I was taking a woodshop class in junior high, I made a 3D chessboard that nobody played and just sat in my room forever, but it became a table. Um, but then I actually really started exploring game mechanics when I was in high school, and I was actually making stuff with some friends. It didn't go very far, but that itch for board games I think started early. But I didn't at the time didn't know.
Yeah,
I was not. There wasn't the modern board gaming industry that I know now, or the community. So it was very narrow
yeah,
in
yeah.
what I was exposed to.
And um, time passes. Um, you practically. When did you discover modern board games? I mean,
I had a very good friend. This is after I got married. I wasn't exposed to modern board games until I was in college. Someone introduced Settlers of Catan to me, and then Puerto Rico and several others over time by a friend. He was the one who knew all of the games, and when he was done playing with some of his games, then he would give them to me and my wife, and then we'd play and we'd introduce them to other people, and it really was like my eyes were opened to new,
new worlds.
stuff that was, yeah, just so much more interesting interactions in board games that I was um, certainly not aware of until that time. And then from that point on, it was just there was a lot of it. Uh,
I see.
I was playing all the time, even if I was pursuing professionally other things.
What did you study you mentioned college. What did you study in college? Do you study art? Or
I did. I got a BFA, which is a 5-year degree in illustration and animation. That uh, that focus, the focus in for my college degree was definitely illustration, but at the time, and still now, illustration as a pure illustration is a very hard industry to go in and to raise a family on. So the entertainment industry was
Yeah, an easier.
an area doing concept art, visual development for animation, for video games, for movies. That was, the idea of concept art was something I was introduced in college, and so a lot of my classes eventually narrowed and focused in that direction, and so that's why I went um, into video games ultimately. But I was trained, to possibly do feature animation. I was trained to perhaps be an illustrator for National Geographic or something like that. So I worked in a lot of different things, but illustration was the main focus. I took a lot of animation classes too, so that helped me a lot. But illustration was the focus. Eventually turning to concept art at the end. Um, but I actually I don't know if you're familiar with the company Hallmark Cards.
No.
It's a they it's just a very big company here in the United States
I
that
know
make
what Hallmark is. Hallmark was, I think it was a big the TV station, or they had
it,
programs. It's the
it's
same.
now a bit. Yeah, it's a bigger TV station now, but its primary thing, its original thing was greeting cards,
Oh, I
and
see.
they work with a lot of illustrators at their company. So while I was at school, I interned at Hallmark, and so it was very likely I could have been doing greeting cards, birthday cards, and things like that if my paths had gone into different directions, because I very much enjoyed being there. But anyway, so I was studying illustration and animation. That was what my degree it was in, and it evolved to concept art
No,
for video
I
games.
see. And you have discovered board games
Hmm.
in your life. They came into your life. They swoop you off your feet.
They they descended upon me.
What kind of a player are you? What kind of a game? What kind of games do you play? What kind of games do you
Uh,
enjoy?
I let's see. Gosh, I tell people a lot. I'm very easily pleased with games. It's easy to entertain me in board games. I'm fascinated by mechanics, but I'm not very picky. So I find most games that I play I love. Um, that might be the company that I'm with. I'm not sure what it is. But when I pick like my favorite games, like I really love engine building games. I'm and games that tell a story and have a decent amount of world building. I play abstract games. Like my favorite game probably is Scythe, or I love Lost Ruins of Arnak. Gosh,
I
a
see. But
favorite of mine.
so are you a Euro gamer, or are you more an RPG, or how?
Oh
What do you?
no, definitely Eurogamer. I mean that phrase, I never quite know exactly what defines a Eurogamer to everybody, but I no, I don't do RPGs really at all. Um, I grew up doing some a little bit, and my siblings do more, and my kids have even done RPGs, but that wasn't something that
Yeah.
I held on to. So no, very much cardboard Euro game. That type of stuff is definitely my area. So uh,
and and you are a, you are a player, probably working, trying to make a living. When did a board game company came to you and said, we would like to make us an illustration for our game? When did that happen?
um, well, it took a little while. It's a long history, but it started with Fantasy Flight Games, um, and it's had so many different entities that I've worked with within Fantasy Flight or Asmodee. so I never remember which is the actual entity that contacted me first. But um, I did do some work on a game called Descent a ways
Yeah.
back. I did some cover art for books and things that they were producing. But the very first game was Mission Red Planet. They the guys that I had been working for Fantasy Flight for many years at the time that I started with Mission Red Planet. I had done collectible card games and things like Game of Thrones card game and a variety of different things with them. And I, over time, getting to know the art directors there, I kind of hinted, I'm wanting something a little bit different than what I had been doing. I could do the cards, I could match the style that they needed me to or whatever, but I was kind of done being like an artist that just mimicked other people's stuff and or matched, to the style of the game. I kind of wanted to do my own thing, and Mission Red Planet was I think the thing that
That.
they were like, hey, we're doing a reboot of this game, and I had a little bit lighter style, a little more stylized look to my work, and they thought that was a really good fit, and so they said, hey, could you take this on, and so that was the first project in board
In
games.
board games, and apparently you enjoyed it. You liked doing that. You liked create. How 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 do what is your process to go from something which is on paper and has mechanisms to something that creates a world? To create a world from something that are probably words, which are rules,
Mhm.
and some, I don't know, maybe some sketches, some prototypes, some, but to create a world out of that.
Well, it's the answer is probably going to be a little less intriguing or exciting than the question makes it seem like it could be. I Most of the time, I'll say most of the time, I'm certainly not involved with the any part of the design of the game.
Of course.
So the mechanics, of course, are all sorted out and figured out. They send them to me, and that's fine. But uh, often I'd say, especially early on when I was working in board games, there was not really even any of that type of collaboration. They weren't asking for that. They So they would often, uh, and there's more to this answer, but which I'm happy to explain, but in a second. But even in things like Everdell, the world building didn't come from a collaboration with design or with looking at the game design and saying, okay, most of the time I never got to play the games until I was done with the project. I saw an early prototype of Everdell, but truthfully, they said, Andrew, here is a space. Put an image in here. And there was some idea, there was some brainstorming about the world before I started working on the artwork, but it did not involve the design at all. It was not something other than over time I understood how games were put together. I understood what was needed on a board and how to give place for graphic design and other elements and things like that. But besides that, most of the time it was Andrew fill a space. And so even for Everdell, which we put a lot of world building
Yeah.
into, that was more, I would say, if I'm being totally honest, that was within the art. Like that, there wasn't, at the time when we were first starting to work on Everdell, there wasn't a real world made. But the game with its original design was meant to be something completely different. It was not woodland creatures, and a cute environment. It was something different, and so it had already changed to be, you know, animals and things like that by the time I came in. But I but there was not like some established world that I needed to follow. So I got to do a lot of that on my own. And so it really, a lot of it was just, I think it came out of, there's some artsy things that I would say, had an impact on it, that may or may not be interesting to normal people, but it was in the process of making the art that we put, I think, a lot of the life into it. And while I was doing that, it was mostly me doing that. My art director Dan May was a huge influence throughout the process, and he's a great illustrator himself. And so we worked together on things, but ultimately they were very kind and trusting, and just said, Andrew, run with this and make a cool world. So
So you had
long.
you had no sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, you're fine.
You had no uh, no cohesion with the mechanisms of the game. You created that world the way that you wanted to.
Yes, I would say that's true. It sounds less romantic and exciting, but yeah, I mean and so yeah, I mean
Well,
that's not
it
always the
works.
case anymore. That I think nowadays more thought when I'm working on a game is put into mechanics. I'm not involved again. I'm never really involved in
Design,
design,
yeah, 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 of course.
but I'm having more experience in this industry, knowing games as I do. I am brought in a little bit earlier often, and so I have a chance to see kind of the game at a more raw stage, and so some more thought is put into, okay, what mechanisms are in the game, and what sort of things might fit well. But truly still, it's at times can be very separated between the two.
Um,
Maybe better artists do it differently,
I
but
think in the end, all that matters is if all that matters is to work. If it works, everything's fine. It doesn't matter which
yeah.
avenue you take.
I might be wrong, but I've come to feel like there's things that will look wrong, but there's a whole lot of things that would look right and look fine. I mean, what is it? What can we do in a game that truly, literally translates into, in the case of Everdell, you know, is there something specific about a chipmunk with a broom that I'm going to incorporate into mechanics? No, that
No, no,
it's just artwork that's
yeah,
going to be on a page, and what makes you
yeah,
feel like you're immersing in a world.
yeah,
So, but there are really big picture ideas, big picture approach to a game. There are certain themes or certain ways that we can do things that, like, okay, that would contradict perhaps with the mechanics of the game.
yeah. How the game
And then
feels, how the game
and
feels when you play it. Yeah, I think this
yeah,
is.
but most of the time it supports. There's a lot of options that support any gameplay.
Um, you know, you're an artist. You create worlds. Um, how much do you feel board games more than video games is different, but how
Mm-hmm.
much do you feel board games give ways to an artist to express himself?
Ooh. Well, for me, way more. But I might have a very specific reason for that. I mean, I think board games is a fantastic industry to be in as an artist, for specifically expressing yourself. As that sounds really artsy fartsy, but I I so where I came from in video games, I was just uh, a gear in the big machine. I was just one tiny little piece, and very specifically, like, as a concept artist, which I loved, and I still do love concept art. The idea of coming up with ideas, and going through them fast. In concept art, you create like 100 different ideas,
And you churn
and
to them, yeah, through them, probably.
you get through them fast, and you're just it's all creativity and it's all interesting things, and then they pick one thing. If you're lucky to be the artist that they pick out of the 100 you did, maybe it's your coworker that he did 100 things and they picked his one thing, so they throw away all of mine. But even in concept art, when they like a design that I'm making, ultimately that artwork is never seen. It's very rarely seen by the person who ends up playing the game. That's just not the way it works. I help come up with the blueprints. Somebody else makes the actual thing. So as an artist in video games, there were times, there's certainly people who appreciate concept art and the art it is by itself, but most of the time you were just in the background. Nobody would know that you existed. Nobody knew that what artwork you were creating. And in many ways, especially for bigger companies like the company I worked for, which was a wonderful company, but you were put in your place, and this is what your job was, and this is what you would do, and that's it. And when I moved to board games, all of that was thrown out the window. With Mission Red Planet, I was responsible for everything when it came to, not everything visual, but a significant part of how this game will be received visually. So people were seeing what I made as an illustrator, as someone who really cared about illustration. I was excited for people to actually see the brush strokes of how I made an image, and because there's thought put into that, and so illustration, you see that, whereas in video games you don't. And so board games, that's one thing, but another side to it that I think is really neat, and I try to promote and encourage to other artists, is there is no one style that works for board games, and that's it, and that's the only way we're going to do things. Like, there are so many board games being made, and there's room for artists of so many different types, of so many different styles, to come in. And I mean, Kyle Farron and Kyle's a wonderful guy and a fantastic artist, man, and we both at around the same time were making 2 games about woodland critters.
Yeah.
And
one
and
is
they could
root,
be,
and one, because we're talking about root, the other one,
the styles, it would be hard for them to be very much more different than they are. I mean, I love Kyle's style and his work on anything, but there's room for in the exact same moment for 2 woodland creature games to come out, but they can be made by 2 completely different artists with 2 completely different styles, and they both can be successful. So in video games and in fantasy illustration, that was something I spent a lot of time in before coming into board games. I thought I needed to be a Magic the Gathering artist or work for Tor, the book publisher, and things like that. And they've got a style. You've got to
fit.
You've got to fit right there. And if I worked really hard for a long time. When I first left the studio and went freelance, wasn't thinking about board games at the time. I thought the only way I could succeed as an illustrator was to be a Magic the Gathering artist. And so I worked my butt off to get my work to be at a level that I thought would work for them. And I thought I was there. I thought it was really, really close. It's nothing like what people see of my work now. It's much more realistic, but it just wasn't enough. And so it's like I finally was like, why am I beating myself up to
be someone
so
else?
Anyway, board games, there's no gatekeepers in board games as far as what is an appropriate style for a board game. Quan Chai Maria, him and I have very, very different styles too, and he is a fantastic artist. And it's like, I mean, that's one of the things I just love. I love about the board game industry. There's going to be people who like what I do, and there's going to be people who think my stuff is lame, and then there's going to,
it's too pretty.
maybe it's too pretty. Sure. Like I said, I'm a very PG-13 guy. So, there's going to be people who want something different than that, and that's great. So I think it's a great place to be as an artist.
Well, I will I have kind of two questions into one now.
Okay.
How important do you think is a cover, and how important it is that that cover transitions to what you find in the box? The board,
Uh,
the components, because
uh,
sometimes you will find a very beautiful board which has nothing, sorry, a very beautiful cover which has nothing to do with what's inside.
well, I think a cover is very, very important. I am definitely a person who judges a book or a game
By
by
its
its cover
cover.
because I need. I love all different types of art styles, but it needs to be like I need to feel. I care about playing games with good art, frankly, and that might be really graphic. Anyway, the cover is what brings me in for sure. In fact, I have a friend who just sent me an email yesterday. He knows I'm looking for some two-player board games to play with my wife. My wife and I, long story, we just finished an incredibly long tournament of one game, and we're done. And I said, once we're done with this tournament, we need a new game. We're putting this thing away. We're never playing it again, and we're going to play a new board game. And I need a new board game to play. And so he sent me a list of all these games that he likes, and I'm going down the list. I'm going, I can't play that. That cover is ugly. I can't play it. I can't play that one. I can play that one. I can play. I can't play that one, the first edition, but I can play the second edition of that one because the art is better. Anyway, so cover to me is very, very important. The transition to the game, I'd like to think that that is very important too. I mean, if you were to, in the extremes, if you were to take one artist for the cover and then change that artist to a different, use a different artist for everything on the inside, which sometimes people ask me to do, I most of the time say no because I don't want to do that. I like being part of the whole thing, but I think that that won't work most of the time. The
Yep.
one big exception would be Unconscious Mind, which is coming out, and that's me and Vincent Dutrait working together. And who would have thought that would
Will
that's
work,
also a
yeah.
long story.
But I think that because you have the real world and the dreams, and
Yes,
yeah, I think that you can do it. But yeah, it's a special, somehow it's a special situation. But most board games are what's on the cover. You will find later on the. You should find later on the board and things like that.
I
Please
believe so.
go on.
No, that's what I feel like. I mean, I when I'm talking to clients, it's always a question that for me, this is not the most important thing. It's certainly not the most important thing for all gamers. But if people are hiring me, usually, then they're looking for something that is somewhat immersive. Like there's a world and they want to feel like they're in it for a while they're playing this
Yep.
game, I think.
Yep.
And so the question of immersion in the world or in the game and dispelling, the rest of the world around me. I want to just be focused on this. It's those little choices that make a difference in that. So the transition from if from a different artist or a different style or anything like that,
You will
uh,
immediately see it. You'll
you
feel it
will.
somehow.
Yeah. And now that's not necessarily always
The
the,
case, yeah.
there are good ways and bad ways to do it. For example, I did the cover for there's a game coming out called Union Stockyard, a first time publisher, and in the end he had me do the cover and that's it. And I was looking into doing the board. I was going to do the board for him, um, and but in the end, I finished the cover. I'm very happy with the cover, and I'm very excited for his game. It went on Kickstarter, funded, everything's great. But in the end, we decided that it would be better for him to just use a graphic designer to make the board because, for a variety of reasons. But seeing
Gameplay wise, probably.
mostly gameplay,
Yeah.
he just his game was a very uh, meaty game with lots of details and lots of information and lots of graphs and lots of little pieces moving all over the place, that artwork wasn't going to be, if I painted something there, it would be covered for one. It would probably distract from everything. And anyway, in the end, the graphic designer took the spirit of what I had on the board, on the cover, and he took that and successfully, in my opinion, successfully created a very graphic design heavy board that works really well with the cover, and it fits with the theme very, very well. So sometimes it can do just fine. There's not like some rule as far as how it works, but it is those little choices that you make that I think can, by little tiny degrees, take away whether you're feeling like you're in that world or not.
What do you think is important to be? Um, can you be both a graphic designer and an illustrator, or you can excel at one, do something else? Is that, can you do it both? What is it for you? Or how is it for you easier to work?
Well, I am definitely an illustrator first before a graphic designer. I do both, but when a client comes to me in board games, I rarely say, "Hey, I could do graphic design." Um, it's I'm sure there are plenty of people who excel at both. I mean, Ian O'Toole is a great illustrator, and I believe does all the
Does,
graphic
yeah, I think
design
he
for
does
all of
also.
his
Yeah.
stuff, and they all look gorgeous. So yes, you can. Um, I think, and so it's just different for different artists. I love graphic design, and I love working with great graphic designers. Um,
Are there
uh,
different? Are they different jobs?
oh yeah, very different jobs. Yeah, I mean, not only just, I mean, there, if if this is the circle for illustration and this is the circle for graphic design, it overlaps a little bit. I mean, there's core things like, I mean, color and composition and the core of art is important for both those things, but the process is completely different, and the goal is very, very different too. So, and then on top of that, the tools that you use are very different. So, I love graphic design. I am actively right now trying to become better at it. I'm writing a book, and I'm for something projects coming up for my in my brand Wits End. I will be the graphic designer for them, for those projects. So I want to do better at it. I think like for me personally, I understand graphic design. I understand typography. I understand, a lot of the individual elements that go into it, but I don't have the best practices
Well,
to be an efficient graphic designer
yeah, because
most of the time.
yeah, there are two hats practically. You have to be able to take one off and put the other on.
Yeah.
How do you feel it's better to work with somebody who can see your, let's say, mistakes when somebody where in some moments you might overlook some things because maybe you're more drawn to put more illustration where you shouldn't put more illustration, uh, over graphic design.
I mean that there's never a point where there's too much illustration. That's silly talk, but no. Um, no, I mean, so is the question like, what exactly is the question there? Sorry.
The question is it easier to work with somebody who can tell you, I think here we put a bit too much, I think we should
Ah.
cut a little bit
I, I
because
certainly have no problem with that. I don't, I think all the artists that I know that work in this industry, I don't think that would ever be an issue for anybody. It's certainly not for me. I love great graphic design, and I love working with graphic designers. So the people that I work with, uh, first of all, we often figure all this stuff out before I do anything. So, like Matt Paquette is a very well known graphic designer in the board game industry and a very good friend, and we work together quite often. And so, uh, a lot of times we will discuss the things just me and him, and go, okay, how is this going to work? Where are you going to, where is this going to be graphic design heavy and where's the illustration going to be?
Yeah.
And where is it going to overlap? And so we plan, under the best scenarios, we plan those out together. And that probably, so that is good. I think that that's fantastic arrangement. For my own projects where I have to be the illustrator and the graphic designer, there probably is some conflict of interest there sometimes, where I don't know what is the best decision, so I have to go by my gut, which may not be useful. So
Yeah.
so I do appreciate working with great graphic design. I just can't afford to hire a great graphic designer, so I got to do it myself.
What is what? And now I go to a more board game related question. Let's say, what is fun to you as a gamer?
What is fun
Yeah. What do you find
in board games?
in board games? Yeah.
I love uh, I love any engine building. I love. This sounds really silly, but I feel like engine building is like life lessons for me. Like the idea of, okay, if I could do this, then if I could do this first, then this is going to be better later, and then this is going to be better later, and building that puzzle to me is one of my favorite things. And I in a game, and then I also happen to think that that's a pretty decent life lesson as well. Like there's an order to things, and if we do things, if I can figure out, probably not always possible or even real, but I like to think sometimes, okay, if I did this in life, then this will affect my decision later on in this. And I love to plan and I love to think through those decisions ahead of time. And so engine building is really one of my favorite mechanics for sure. So I love that when that comes into games like Scythe, and or it piggybacks off of other mechanics like set collection, or
Yep.
So
Yep. I see. There's a little bit of that your father's computer programming.
yeah, probably.
It's in there,
Yeah,
DNA. Um, what your I'll probably talk. Your first published game is the illustrated game. Is as you said, Mission Red Planet, right?
yes.
That was your first one. And can I ask you what is your most played game?
By me or by other people?
No, no. By you, by you.
Uh, Sorry, most played game that I've played
Yes. Well, most played game that you played in your lifetime as a board gamer.
Okay, but not necessarily
Not necessarily
something
something you did. Nope. No.
Okay. No. Okay. Okay. This goes into what something I hinted at with my wife, and I've talked about this before. But you are the first to know this final thing. So probably the game I played the most is a game called Attica. It is it was out of print for a little while, and then it was picked up recently by someone else, and then the theme changed and everything was different, but the game stayed the same. But the original game is Attica. My wife and I, in fact, played it so much that really about 3 years ago, we decided to have a tournament, a 50-game tournament, to see who was going to win, who was the best at this game. We played it so often that we decided we wanted to know who was the best. So we had a 50-game tournament, which she won. But I didn't feel like that was right, so we decided to make it best 2 out of 3 of 50-game tournaments each. So it was a 150-game tournament. We were so close to finishing, and we had this little sheet keeping track of who had won what games. And at some point, we had stopped playing for a little while, and at some point, my wife, like we were literally like 10 games away from figuring it out, and I was in the lead. And my wife, at some point, because there was a gap between the last game we played, she says, I don't think that this is accurate anymore. So she ripped up the sheet. So we were maybe 140 games into that tournament, and she rips up the sheet and says it's not valid. So a year and a half ago, I made a wooden chalkboard with a new chart, and we started a new tournament, a new 350
50
game
games.
tournament. And I want you to know that we just finished it this week.
And who was the winner?
This guy. It literally came down to the last game.
I
We
see.
were we are so matched up that it wasn't literally the last game. If I was ahead 2 to 2 on this last game of 7. It's complicated, but I was ahead 2 to 2. Then I won one game 3. If I won one more,
I
then it
see.
would have been it,
I
and I
see.
did, and that was it. And she hasn't forgiven me, so. But that is the game. That's a long story, but that is the game Attica. I've told people about this tournament. It's been going on for a while, but you are the first to know that I
You're the
won.
winner. I see.
I'm the winner.
Now, what is your? Can I ask you what's your favorite, or who is your favorite designer?
Ooh, gosh, that is a. Right now, I'm going to say it's Min and Elwyn.
I see.
Lost Ruins of
Last
Arnak.
design. Okay, it's two designers. I
That's
think no,
2.
it's two.
I threw in 2. Yeah,
Okay.
they're a husband and wife team.
Yeah. Um, and who is your favorite illustrator
Uh, in board games or outside of board games?
in board games?
In board games, Vincent Dutrait, for sure.
Vincent Dutrait. Wait. And I wanted to ask you what's your favorite game, but probably Scythe. You have already said that. Probably Scythe.
Yeah. It's a tie between Scythe and Lost Ruins of Arnak, and there's a couple others that are really, really close. But yeah, Scythe is my go-to.
Now, this was the first, almost done with the first part of my with these questions. Would you want something to add before we end this part? Something that I might not have asked you, something which you would have wanted to talk about, but I might not have asked you?
Um, well, I don't know. I don't want to dictate what should or shouldn't. Well, I will say, um, uh, is I'm very excited about. I'm always excited about the projects that I'm working on for other clients. But I will say I'm very, very excited about some projects that I'm working on my own, um, and which will be very important. Not important. Which will be relevant to the board game industry, to the board game community soon. But I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But if people were to go to my website,
Yeah.
they would they would know. Basically, I've been working on. I have a brand called Wits End Studios. This is my personal brand. These are anything that comes out that is part of Wits End is something that I worked on mostly myself. It's, at least when it comes to world building and art and all that sort of thing. And I have several projects in the works right now that I'm really, really excited about. But the first is one called The Smoking Bones. And all this artwork up here is related to that. I'm working on a book that I hope to be releasing in a little ways from now. Not immediately, but soon, and it's in the process is going on. And there will be a board game is connected with it.
I see.
And without saying too much, which I
much.
promised I wouldn't say, it is made of a very fantastic team of people involved, and I expect
Of
it will make a
designers and all of that.
yes.
Okay. I am quite.
So I would recommend people go to my site and check that out. I don't currently have it up right now, but by the time this is out or soon,
It's gonna be on your
I will
website.
also I'm also doing a Patreon where people are going to be able to get an inside look at this project that is moving forward.
I see. Now we go to the questionnaire which I have, which is Proust's questionnaire, which was distilled by Bernard Pivot and then by James Lipton. And the first question which I'm going to ask you is, what's your favorite word?
What's my favorite word?
Yep.
Uh, oh my.
Something.
There's so many good words. I'm
Yeah.
going to throw out one. Commodore.
Commodore. I see. I see.
It has meaning.
Yep. What is your least favorite word?
Least favorite word. Uh, I don't know.
You must have one. We all have words which we don't like. I'm buying you time.
I'll give you one. My daughter. I was just talking to her. This is kind of gross, and it's not, or not gross, but uh, my daughter was. I was sitting with my daughter somewhere, and she was sitting next to someone else that we didn't know, and she told me that guy really uh, has a problem with man spreading. That was something, a word I had heard before, and it kind of like that's weird.
Weird, yeah. You're right.
But I know what it is, and it's not probably not my worst favorite word or anything, but that was a weird word. It's like,
What turns you on? Creatively, emotionally, spiritually?
what turns me on? I'll keep it PG 13, but creatively, other great artists. I love looking at other artists' work. That's for creatively and nature. Just being out, just being and seeing things that are already in the world.
I see.
That stuff turns me on.
And what turns you off?
What turns me off? Oh, there's plenty of things that turn me off. Uh, Politics, people arguing, not nice people. Uh, that's not creatively. That's just personally.
Yeah, yeah,
I
of
don't.
course, of course.
I like nice people that are nice, and I like people that are willing to forgive people's mistakes. And
I see. I
so
see. Yeah,
so that it turns me off when people aren't don't do that.
yeah. Now I know you're a PG-13, but I have to ask you this question.
Go for it. I'll do my best.
What's your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word. This is gonna sound really silly, but I don't curse, so I don't have a favorite one other than something that's like totally tame to probably ever, and
Yeah,
I don't have a favorite. So crap
crap.
would be about as cursing as I
Yeah,
get.
it's a good one. It has a lot of meaning. The
It
word
does.
crap.
It does.
What sound or noise do you love?
Wait, say it again.
What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, I love the sound of fans and air conditioning and uh, and and the rain. I could hear the rain outside my window right now. I love the sound of rain.
And what sound or noise do you hate?
Um, I hate my kids just bought a rubber chicken for our dog, and they love to step on it, and it makes this honking noise that is just the worst thing ever. But next up after that would be like the buzzer on Taboo, the game Taboo. There's a little that's I hate that.
Which profession outside the one you already do would you like to attempt?
Woodworking.
Woodworking. And what profession outside the one you already do you would not like to attempt?
Um, uh, Politician, uh, or uh, sewer cleaner. They're
Good professions. Yeah,
they
you brought them so close.
they're so close.
uh, and my last question is, if heaven exists, what would you expect God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh wow. I do believe that heaven exists, and what do I expect him to say to me?
Yeah.
What do I? You're not supposed to be here, uh, or you just barely made it, or I don't know. Come on in, you screw up. I don't know. That's a
Yeah. Um, Now I have a question. We'll finish with one more question, which was asked here, which I think is pretty good, and I will add it to my list of questions to future interviews. How do you deal with artist block?
um. I don't think I suffer from artist block in the same way that maybe other people do. There's never like an end of things that I want to draw or paint. Um, it's, but maybe this is the way other people do it. My problem is probably it's not a lack of creativity or an idea of what to draw. It's procrastination to just get it done. And so what do I mean, I'm always working for clients so it's my personal, the things that are really creative are my personal projects through Wits End or whatever. And so how do I get through that? That is really hard. Um, I'm a planner. I try to be a very organized person, and I'm fairly disciplined when I plan. So for me, and this is probably not a great answer to the person who asked the question, but because it's not very creative. But um, uh, for the things that are the hardest for me, which is procrastination or
Yeah.
just having a hard time deciding, if I say I'm going to do a thing, then I usually do it. Or if I write it down and put it in my calendar or my notes, okay, this is what I'm going to get accomplished today, then I work pretty hard to get to that. But speaking creatively, I think the thing that I'm sure I do get a creative block at times, or maybe discouragement, uh, like I'm not good enough to do it, or whatever it may be. Uh, I think kind of the things that turn me on from your earlier question are help with that creative block. When I look at other artists, I either go, man, you really better get starting working because that guy is so much better than you. That girl is so much better than you. You better pick up that pencil and start working. Or I just look at them. I look at something another artist has done and just say, that is incredible. Maybe you could try something like that. And then I want to get back to work. But it's not usually a creative block. Like, what am I going to do now? What am I going to paint now? There's just not enough time in the day for me to paint all the things I want to paint. So,
Yep. And one more question: do you feel you are one of the best in the industry?
uh, I don't know if I'm gonna. Uh, that is a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I know.
Uh, um, uh, the industry is small, so how can I be honest and Uh, uh, there are. I don't know if I'm. No, I don't know if I. If, maybe one of the best only because people know who I am. So some of other artists are just not known. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of artists. I mean, one, there's not a lot of artists in this in this industry that do only work in this industry. So I mean, I'll do other work in other industries, but 95% of my day to day is in board games. So people see my work a lot. So, but I wouldn't compare it to any of the other artists that are also being used, uh, that are working mostly in the board game industry. We're just very different. So no, I don't think that. I think that there are artists out there that have. I mean, I have a lot more experience and I've worked on. So there are going to be artists that I'm better at doing the art than. But I think there's so many artists out there that have done like one or two games and then they go on to do something different, and we just don't even know about them. And some I do know about, and I can think of the art. I might not necessarily even remember the name, but so I'm really weaving around this one. There's fantastic artists out there. I might be one of the better artists just because my name might
Come out.
come up,
Yeah. Come up.
but
Awesome. Yes.
there's so many other great artists out there in this industry, and so many amazing artists out there that they don't even know that this industry exists. Um, and when
Probably.
if I'm saying, am I the in me in comparison to all of the artists in the world, I'm I'm not like bottom of the barrel. I'm not, but I'm not. There's so much better than me.
Thank you for your time, Andrew. Thank you for this lovely discussion. I hope people see it as many people as well, we will as I reach with my reach right now, but in time I know more and more people will see it. It was a very interesting time to spend here for 1 hour and 12 minutes together. I hope it was you had a good time. I hope you felt good.
I love it. It was wonderful. I love to talk about this industry and to talk about the stuff. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I love what I do, so it's fun to talk about. So and I love this community, and so I love to talk and answer questions anytime I can. So I'm happy to come back another time. I loved it that much
Thank
that I'd
you.
love to come back.
Thank you. I hope you felt comfortable. Um, Thank you again for your time, and hopefully we will meet in person somewhere, sometime in time.
I hope so. I hope so.
Thank you again. I will do the outro, and then please don't go so we can speak a little bit afterwards.
Okay.
Um, this was our discussion with Andrew Bosley. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like, as always, if you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe, because you know it keeps the internet alive. Also, more subscribers help the channel, and it helps me to talk to publishers and so on. I'm not a rich YouTuber who asks you for who asks for more and more subscribers. I'm just trying to add more to be able to do this even better than I do it right now. So again, if you like, please like, share, and subscribe. I want to thank again Andrew for doing this. I want to thank you who came and watched live. I want to thank everybody who will come and watch after the fact. If you like it, like I said, like, share, and subscribe. Until the next one, it will be an interview soon, tomorrow, more with and with, you'll see with whom, with David Turci. Until next time, all I can say is play a lot. What it says here, it says in Romanian, but well, it's nice to say it also in English. Play a lot, play loads, as you Brits say, have fun, and bye bye, fine folks, wherever in the world you are.